Okay, we're now recording. I'm going to hop over here to my notes and try to shrink this window down so I can see your comments at the same time as I see my notes. Okay, so today the main thing that I want to talk to you about is why our goals fail. If you have any questions at all during the course of this workshop, let me know. I highly recommend grabbing a piece of paper and a pen to take some notes. There's going to be stuff you're going to want to write down, and I hope you're going to learn a lot today. I'm going to start by giving you a few very shocking goal setting statistics. Over 80% of the US population does not set goals. Another 14% set goals but never write them down. And for those that set goals but do not write them down, the 14% of the population, they are estimated to be 10 times more successful in achieving their goals than the 80% who didn't set goals at all. There is a 3% of the population that sets written goals. They set goals and they write them down. And that 3% is proven to be over 30 times more successful than the 14% that sets goals but never writes them down. So that's crazy, right? 30%, 3% of the population sets goals and writes them down, and they are 30% more successful. And I came across another statistic, which is that only 1% of the population sets goals, writes them down, and reviews them regularly throughout the year. I could not find any information about how successful those people were, but I can only imagine that they are going to be so much more successful than even the 3% who sets goals and writes them down, simply because they're checking in with their goals throughout the year. So I think we've all probably had frustrations with the goals, with our goals. Does anybody feel that? Have you ever felt like you have set a goal that hasn't happened, or just been frustrated, feeling like it's a failure, or you haven't achieved it, or you're not on schedule, or you're not going to meet that deadline, or you're just tired of being on that goal, you feel burnt out? Anybody? And just in general, like feeling like giving up. Heather says, I'm bad about revisiting them or breaking large ones down into more manageable chunks. Definitely do things that have to happen. So today we're going to talk about 3 things. You don't have to write this stuff down, but the first thing I'm going to talk about is I'm going to give you 10 reasons why traditional goal setting doesn't work. So we're going to talk briefly about what traditional goal setting looks like, and then I'm just going to run through a rapid fire list of why it doesn't work. Then I'm going to give you, I want you to know, I'm going to share with you 7 reasons our goals fail. And then I'm going to give you 10 questions you can ask yourself as we all start to get prepared for goal setting in 2019. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to cover that information as rapidly as I can, because I know, like, as I said before, I know your time is valuable. Okay, let's talk about traditional goal setting really quickly. Have you guys ever heard of the SMART goals acronym? Can I get any hands, or yes? Have you heard of that acronym, SMART goals? Okay, we have 1 yes and 1 no. So I'll run through it really fast. SMART is an acronym, and it stands for, yes, Susan says yes quite a lot. It permeates corporate America. It's everywhere. So SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive. You don't have to write that stuff down. But this acronym debuted in 1981. A guy named George Duran wrote an article for a business management journal. And this is a goal setting method that was simple enough that it caught on like wildfire, and a lot of people have tried to adopt it in recent years for personal goal setting method. Actually, I shouldn't even say recent years. It's been the only goal setting method that has clicked with people. But here's the thing. It was designed for companies and corporations and businesses as a way for managers to track employee performance. And improve employee performance. It was not ever intended to be a personal goal setting method, as many people currently use it. And I was using this method of setting goals when I stepped back, literally, like held my paper, my goal setting paper in front of me, and realized that not only was I not achieving any of my goals, and I couldn't figure out why, but that all my goals were very lopsided. They were all business related. And I had been using the SMART acronym for years to set goals. And I pretty much at that point in time, this is about 6 years ago, I think. And pretty much at that point in time, I was like, I'm just going to give up on goals. I'm just going to stop setting them because this SMART thing doesn't work. And I didn't want to do that. I like setting goals. I'm one of those people who just thinks it's fun. I don't know if that's you or not. That's an interesting. Do you think goal setting is fun? How do you guys feel about that? But for me personally, I like the process and I wanted to do it. So I started researching and came across a lot of very interesting information that I'm getting ready to share with you. Before I do that though, one thing I do want to emphasize is that if this is a paradigm shift, I want you guys to start believing. If the goal doesn't happen, we need to quit beating ourselves up. If we've set a goal and we haven't achieved it, we need to get out of the mindset of calling ourselves a failure, thinking that we've failed the goal, that we just don't have it in us, that we just don't have what it takes. When we don't achieve a goal, we've done something wrong in the planning process. That's it. Because if you plan your goals the right way, you can accomplish them. It all comes down to how the process that you use to set them. And it's an in-depth process. I have done a lot of research on this, and I've tried to incorporate as much scientific basis for this goal, the Heart Goals goal setting method, as I possibly can. Okay, so really quickly, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Whitney English. I am an entrepreneur, a wife, and a mom. I started my first business when I was 22. It was a wholesale stationery company. Grew it from $1,500 of babysitting money to almost $1 million a year in annual revenue. I've had products in O Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, Traditional Home, Glamour Magazine, InStyle Magazine, and on the Today Show twice. In 2006, I was selected as one of Country Living Magazine's Entrepreneurs of the Year. And in short, I say none of that to brag, but just to say it's a good run, and I have a lot of experience in some of this stuff. That first business I started when I was 22, after 10 years, filed bankruptcy. And I learned so much from the 30,000-foot perspective that it gave me. And when I started Day Designer, which is a business most people know me for, the planner company, I set a goal to sell it and actually did that. That is not the biggest achievement of my life. Definitely, I hope that ends up being my kids. But it was definitely a goal that I ended up achieving, a huge one. And now a lot of people want to know where I still am in that. I still consult with the Day Designer team. I still use Day Designer. I use 2 of them. They're both right here. And use those to keep my goals on track. And I'm going to show you how I do that in the, I'm going to do 3 of these workshops this week, and I'm going to show you how I do that in the workshop on Friday. Okay, now I'm going to talk really briefly about why SMART goals don't work. I'm going to give you 10 reasons. Starting with number 1, that first letter in the acronym, they say SMART goals have to be specific. And being specific about our goals does help, but there are 3 types of goals: short-term, mid-range, and long-term. And the further our goals get from us, the harder it is to be specific about them. So it's easy to be specific about short-term goals, but harder to be specific about mid-range goals, and almost impossible to be specific about long-term goals. You can have a vision, but you just can't get specific enough to call it a goal. And the vision is very important and is a very big part of the Heart Goals goal setting process. Reason number 2 why SMART goals don't work is the acronym says they have to be measurable. And flat out, I just do not subscribe to this belief. I believe that when you set a measurement, you're looking for a number, you're trying, let's say you're trying to lose weight and you want to lose 5 pounds, and you don't hit that 5 pounds by a certain date, I full on believe we have set ourselves up for failure. And that's the point at which we feel like giving up on the goals. We need to have grace for ourselves in achieving our goals. And I think it's totally fine to give yourself a date or a deadline or a measurement, but we have to do that with the mindset that if we don't reach it, it's okay. We need to be focusing on the progress that we've made. And I'm going to talk more about that in a second. The third thing about SMART goals is the acronym next says that the goals have to be achievable. And this is just another one. This is just too easy. And again, this was created for corporations and businesses as a way to track employee performance. So of course, they want employees to feel like they've been successful and they feel like they've achieved goals. But for us personally, we don't maximize our potential when we set basic goals. And I really want to challenge you in 2019 to set some really audacious goals. And I'm setting some audacious goals for myself. I'm going to share those with you on Friday. And throughout 2019, I'm going to be showing you all that. I'm going to be doing my goal setting process in a very public manner so that you guys can see how I go about setting my goals and then achieving them. The fourth letter in the acronym of SMART goals is that your goals need to be realistic. This ties into achievable for sure. It's almost too close to be in the same acronym, but realistic goals are boring and they don't engage with us emotionally. And if we can engage with our internal motivation and emotional motivation, we are going to be more likely to achieve audacious goals. So our goals don't have to be achievable and realistic. It's totally fine if you want to set, I've seen some people set goals that it's like, they're like, these are my goals for the week. And I'm like, that's just your to-do list. Those aren't goals. So we're going to talk more about that. And definitely the heart goals process goes pretty deep into some of that stuff. But goals don't need to be achievable and realistic. I think it's better for us to set some really big, audacious mid-range goals and then create our to-do list based off of those. Okay, the fifth letter in the acronym for SMART was that it has to be time sensitive. And this goes back to measuring things. Again, time sensitive is almost so close to measurable that it doesn't even need to be in the same acronym. But the thing about stuff being time sensitive is it sets us up for failure again. And when we focus on deadlines, I don't know about you, and I know I'm a bit of an anomaly, but sometimes I'm like, oh, hi deadline, bye deadline, and you just sail right past it. And so deadlines, if I don't achieve a deadline, I often feel like I haven't done anything the right way, and that I've set myself up for failure. So now I have 5 more reasons that they relate to SMART goals, but they don't relate to each of the individual letters. The next one is that, so basic. SMART goals was created for businesses and corporations and was never intended to be a personal goal setting method. So that's another thing that's wrong with our goal setting method. I already covered that. The next thing that traditional goal setting and SMART goals doesn't really help us do is it doesn't help us envision success. And just as important as envisioning success is envisioning the obstacles for what we're going to. So that's number 7 is it doesn't help us envision success. Number 8 is it doesn't help us envision obstacles so that we can create a plan for overcoming those. That is almost more important than envisioning ourselves achieving the goal. The 9th thing is it doesn't account for all of our areas of life. When I stepped back and realized I had set only business goals, I also realized that I hadn't set any goals for my family, for my kids, for my personal well-being. I realized that I hadn't been practicing self-care, that my life was completely out of balance because SMART goals doesn't account for helping us achieve balance in life. And then the last thing, I touched on this briefly with the point about goals not needing to be realistic, is SMART goals doesn't help us assign meaning to our goals. Like, it doesn't help us connect emotionally and motivate ourselves internally. So you can kind of see how SMART goals would work in a business setting, but in our personal lives, when we want to, I mean, when you're an employee and you're working a job, you just want to do what your employer wants you to do to make them happy. But in our personal lives, I fully believe, and I think you guys believe about yourselves, that there is a lot of potential inside you, and I want to help you harness that potential in your goal setting so that you can reach the stuff that you really want to dream about. Okay, that's it. That's 10 reasons why traditional goal setting doesn't work. I'm going to the next flight. If you have any questions, I can pause for a second. I know I'm going really quickly, but I'm happy to answer any questions as we go. I think you guys are probably all just writing stuff down. So next, I'm going to talk about the 7 reasons why our goals fail. And somebody typed something. When did you realize this? Probably about 6 years ago. So it's 28, probably about 2012, maybe before that. Probably about, my first business started struggling in about 2010. In 2008, the recession hit, and we had a huge customer file bankruptcy, which eventually snowballed into why we needed to file as a business. And so it was right about that time that I started looking at life thinking, like, what's not working here? And part of that was I was disorganized. And so I created the planner, I created days to help me get organized about my schedule. But my journey into goal setting has been a deeper dive, a longer journey, and something that I've even learned a lot about in the past 2 years. And so that's where all this research has been, and this realization has been coming from. Okay, 7 reasons. Great question, Sherry Lynn. Thanks for asking. The first reason our goals fail is probably the biggest one. And I'm going to talk more about this in the second workshop on Wednesday. But it's that we don't believe we can achieve them. It's so simple, but we make so many excuses in our head for why we are too much, or we're not enough, or why we don't have the resources. We say we don't have the time or the money, or we say we don't know the right people, we don't have the right network, or we say we're afraid of failure, or I've heard people say that they're afraid of success. Does anybody relate to any of these excuses in their head? Other excuses I've heard people say are that they're afraid that they won't be able to spend time with family and friends, or they're afraid that it'll put their life out of balance, or they're afraid of self-promotion. So I have said all of these things to myself in my head, and I realized that this is not a kind way of speaking to myself. And if I want to achieve my goals, I'm going to have to quit allowing those voices in my head, and I'm going to have to be more kind to myself. And I will bring that up again in a second. But that's the first reason why our goals fail, is we don't believe we can achieve them. So basic, so simple. Okay, the second reason our goals fail is that we are hanging on to the past. When we hang on to the past, what comes with that is bitterness and resentment and worry and trying to change things that we can't go back and change. We have to let go of any failures if we want to move forward. We have to let go of mistakes, and we have to quit hoping for a redemption story out of things. A redemption story is possible, but setting a goal for the purpose of having a redemption story is probably not the right kind of internal motivation that we're looking for. Also, with hanging on to the past come a lot of things that hold us back, like guilt or shame or stress or depression or discouragement or exhaustion. So we have got to let go of the past if we're going to move forward in achieving our goals. The third reason our goals fail is because we are not honest with ourselves about where we are. And some interesting information I've come across on this is that we, in our minds, actually, yeah, let me say it this way. In our minds, there is an aspirational self. And then in reality, there is our actual self. And it's fine to recognize our aspirational self, but we also need to be honest with ourselves about our actual self and where we actually are, what we have, what we need, what our needs are, what our current resources and assets are, how we're going to use those things in our goal setting. And that is hard. It is hard to have an honest conversation with ourselves about where we are, because a lot of us, we're really good. I mean, hello. I'm really good at sticking my head in the sand or shoving things under the rug. Let me use all of the cliches here. But we have to know where we are before we can figure out where we want to go and how we want to get there. A good metaphor for this is if I took you up in an airplane and gave you a parachute, pushed you out of the plane, and you landed in the middle of nowhere, and I chunked a map out of that airplane after you and said, find your way to Dallas, you're not going to be able to use that map to Dallas if you don't also have a way of figuring out where you landed with that parachute. So we have to know where we are before we're going to be able to figure out where we want to go and then map a plan to get it there. The fourth reason our goals fail is because we haven't clarified what we want out of life. And this goes back to the aspirational self. So the honest conversation is our actual self and where we really are. And the clarifying where we want to go and the vision, like what we want to achieve out of life, that's our aspirational self. And it's really cool to sit down and think, okay, here's my actual self and here's my aspirational self. Because it's fun to dream. And when you compare, if you were to, do a worksheet for this, and which just came to mind, do this. We'll send this out as a free download to everybody who's on this webinar. But just actual self versus aspirational self. When you compare those two columns, you feel a lot better about the actual self when you realize who your aspirational self is and where you want to go. And that's going to give you a vision. And then it's just connecting the dots. Well, if I'm here on this area, this is where I need to be on the next area. Did that make sense? I feel like I kind of went off my notes on that. So let me know if I need to clarify anything. Okay, thanks, Hannah. The other thing about having a vision is we really can only have one vision. And there's an old proverb I love that my family and friends use on me all the time. And it's, if you chase two rabbits, they both will escape. Meaning we have to find a focus. And that focus is part of clarifying our vision. What advice do you have for getting out of your head and figuring out where you are? That is a great question. Let me hold on to that and try to come back to that at the end of the webinar. Okay, the fifth reason our goals fail is because we don't manage our priorities in the proper order. And this is part of what HEART goals is all about. The HEART acronym stands for, it's loosely based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it starts with making sure that you're taking care of yourself first, your mental self, your emotional self second, third, the people in your life, making sure that you're managing all the important relationships the right way and that we're getting rid of toxic relationships, that we're managing our finances and our resources wisely, and then very, very, very last are the trade and career goals. And I will talk about that more in Wednesday's workshop and Friday's workshop. The sixth reason why our goals fail is that we are using the wrong type of motivation. I've touched on this really briefly, that we need to find internal motivation and we need to use that instead of external motivation. And examples of external motivation would be, we set a goal because we think we should look a certain way, or because we think someone expects something specific from us. They typically tend to be more people-pleasing goals, motivations. motivations based on comparison, like, oh, she's doing that, so I need to go do that. Or, you know, her success level is here, so my success level needs to be there. Those are external motivations and are not really going to help carry us through on an emotional connection, that emotional connection that we need with our goals. So what we need is internal motivation. And the way we find internal motivation is by asking ourselves what the why behind that goal is, and what is the purpose for achieving that? How is it going to benefit you and the people around you? How is it going to help other people? The formula for purpose is what you do best plus helping others. So if you're looking for purpose in your goal setting, the question that you need to ask yourself is, how can that goal serve other people? When you ask yourself that question, you're going to connect with the emotional meaning behind the goal, and it's going to be the proper kind of internal motivation. And the Heart Goals workbook and process makes sure that you do that for your goals. And then I'm looking at my notes. I'm like, I see an important point, but I don't want to make it right now. So remind me to come back to it if I skip it later. And the seventh and last reason our goals fail is probably the saddest one of all, but it's that we simply fail to take action. Action can consist of writing your goals down. When you do that, you've taken an action. Reviewing your goals regularly, you're taking action. Breaking your goals down. All of those are actions that you can take in relation to your goals. And the coolest thing about taking action is it doesn't matter how big or how small a step you take. You can take teeny, teeny, tiny steps, and you're going to get better at taking action. You're actually going to be rewiring your brain. So this does go back to mindset a little bit. You're going to be rewiring your brain to have more of a bias for action and to be better about making things happen. If you're if you've ever done like a couch to 5K or something like that, you know that the first day you get off the sofa, it's hard. But the deeper that you get into that, I learned to run a few years ago. It's been 12 years, but it was the most amazing experience of my life. I had a coach who believed in me until I believed in myself, and she told me I could do it. And then she worked with me little by little at taking those small action steps until I believed in myself and actually saw that I could do it. On our to-do list, when we have a to-do list and we check a box beside our to-do list, we actually end up releasing dopamine into our brains, which helps us feel more successful throughout the day. So sometimes when I'm planning my day, or if I get to the end of my day and I don't feel like I've had a very productive day, I write down what I have done during the day and put a check mark beside it. And it's amazing how much momentum that creates in my life in taking action, and continue to take action and improve that day, like actually finish with a productive day. So taking action is a skill that we can learn to implement in our lives. Okay, so I have some questions to ask you. Let me go back to, what's that point I wanted to make? So when we set goals, we actually need to, I'm going to talk about the motivation to set goals in general, like the goal setting process. We actually don't need to set goals for the purpose of achieving the goal. We don't need to set goals with a focus on the destination. That's kind of focusing on the achievable and realistic aspect of things in SMART goals. We need to set goals for the very purpose of being the best version of ourselves we can possibly be. And the best version of ourselves comes in the process of achieving those goals. It doesn't come in actually reaching that destination. It's part of the whole process, is part of bettering ourselves, improving our mindsets, rewiring our brains, building discipline, and the ability to take action to our lives. And that, when you start to do those things, and when you use the Heart Goals process to implement all of that stuff in your life, that's when crazy stuff starts to happen and you end up in a completely different spot than you thought you were going to be, and it's the spot where you want to be. It's amazing. Okay, so I have a few questions, and you might want to write these down. Questions to ask yourself for in preparation for setting your 2019 goals. The first question is, look at your past goals And in your past goals, have you focused on possibility or probability? And all too often, we focus on the probability. What are the odds with my current skill set that I'm going to be able to achieve this goal? And the thing is, when you set that goal, you probably aren't going to, you're probably going to need to develop a new skill set. And you can do that. I believe you can do it. I have done it with myself. Things that self-discipline and taking action, things that I used to struggle with, I am little by little slowly rewiring my brain to build those characteristics into my life. I believe it's possible, and we need to believe that achieving our goals is possible, and we need to believe in ourselves. We don't need to think about the probability. We need to focus on the possibility. Okay, question number 2 that you can ask yourself is, are you speaking to yourself the way you would speak to a friend? Are you being kind to yourself? If you don't do something, if you don't do something the way you thought you should, or if you end up being disappointed with yourself, or very simply, if you don't even like the way that you talk to yourself in the mirror or the way you look at yourself in the mirror, I've experienced that as well. Are you being kind to yourself? We blame ourselves for so much that we don't need to blame ourselves for. We are perfectly capable of achieving anything that we dream of just the way we are, because we have minds that have the ability, we have the ability to rewire our minds to be anything we want to be. And that's a crazy statement, but I hardcore believe that from my own personal experience. The third question you can ask yourself is kind of a hard one, but is there anything you're holding on to that is also holding you back? Sometimes, very often, the things we are holding on to are also the things that are holding us back. So what can you let go of? And I'm going to talk more about this in the second webinar, because I'm going to talk about decluttering our minds and getting in the right mindset on Wednesday's webinar, Wednesday's workshop. Fourth question you can ask yourself is, what do you need to be focusing on? And there is a great story, I don't know if it's true or not, but supposedly Warren Buffett's private pilot, came to him one day and said, how do I set my goals? And Warren Buffett said, go write down 25 things that you want to do in life. And it's actually really hard to get to 25 things. I've done this. You get to about 20 and you're like, you're kind of pulling stuff out of thin air. So the pilot did that, took his list back to Warren Buffett and said, what do I do now? And here's 25 things. And Warren said, I need you to pick a top 5. So the pilot goes, picks a top 5, comes back and says, what do I do now? And Warren Buffett says, work on those goals. But pilot, I have a question for you. What are you going to do with the other 20 goals? And the pilot said, I'm going to work on them in my spare time. And Warren Buffett said, no, you're not. Those officially became your avoid at all cost list. So the 5 goals are what you focus on. The 20 things, avoid at all cost. And this is back to my, if you chase 2 rabbits, they both will escape. You can chase 5 rabbits. I'm using that to justify my own desire to chase lots of things. But it also ties back to the heart goals method, and so I'll talk about that more. But we can't divide our attentions very much, or we will spread ourselves thin and we won't accomplish anything. Okay, 5th question you can ask yourself is, what is your actual self? Where are you? That relates back to Emily's question about any advice for getting out of your head and figuring out where you are. The honest conversation, so I'll talk about that a little bit here, Emily. The honest conversation with yourself, you can go through the life segments of heart goals, or you can just look at different areas of your life and ask yourself, how much time and money, this is what I like to do. How much time and money am I spending on things? You can actually, a great way to take stock of where you are is you can look at your bank account, because we spend money on the things that matter to us, and we spend time on the things that matter to us. And the reason why this is a difficult conversation to have with yourself is because I'll give an example from my personal life. I know there are days when I spend a lot more time looking at a screen than I do my kids. I don't like that. But that is my actual self. My aspirational self is how much face-to-face time do I want to have with my kids versus screen time that I need for myself. And so that stuff is kind of hard to admit, but when you start to look at where you spend your time and money, it gets easier to determine where you actually are. So I hope that helps for a little bit on that. And then the sixth question you can ask yourself is, what is your aspirational self? And who do you want to be? And this is easier. It's fun. You can dream really big, dream really crazy here. But it's important to have those ideas written down so that when you start to set your vision for next year and your vision for your life, that you have an idea of where you want to go. And then you can connect those dots from where you are to create a plan. The seventh question that you can ask yourself is, are you using internal or external motivation when you set your goals? And you could look at any goals that you set last year, and you could just make a quick list and write out beside them and say, what was my motivation for doing this? And I set a goal. I'm going to give you another personal example here. I set a goal to sell Day Designer shortly after I created it. I just decided, I launched it right before my daughter was born. And then she was born, and there was just a handful of kids. There was just so much going on, and I was like, I need to sell this company. And I set that goal. However, there was motivation behind that goal for it to be a redemption story, and the goal didn't start to happen until I connected. That was external motivation. I wanted to prove to people I could do it. After having a business that failed, I really wanted to reverse that story. But whenever I set the internal motivation is when the goal really started to formulate. And my internal motivation became, I wanted to spend more time with my kids. And that motivated me like nothing else to get that company sold. So I hope that makes sense. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. A lot of people have questions about Day Designer and selling a business. It's unusual for people to sell a business and be okay with it, I think. But it was absolutely the best decision for me and my family. Okay, so that seventh question was, are you using internal or external motivation? The eighth question was, are you focused on the journey or the destination? Are you focused on achieving something, or are you focused on who you're going to become in the process? And when you can focus on who you're going to become in the process, it's just, it ties into motivation. It's just when you realize that you're becoming a better version of yourself and truer to yourself and just all around better, it makes the journey so much more enjoyable. And the failures seem less like failures. It helps you reframe this thing, like failures just become stepping stones. They're seeds toward, in the steps toward success. And then the last question, I said I had 10 of these, but I only have 9. The last question that you can ask yourself in preparing to set your goals for 2019 is, what is the next best action I can take? What is the next, so even as we wrap up this workshop today, and I've got time for some questions here toward the end, I saw Sherry Lynn typing, so I don't know if I answered something or if I can answer anything else. But think about, what is the next best action you can take right after you get off this workshop in setting your goals. It might be, I'm going to do the second workshop on Wednesday at 10 a.m. and it might be that you go mark that off on your calendar and join us for that. Okay, Sherry Lynn has a good question. So then, are we asking ourselves about the why behind the real self versus the aspirational self, or do we just face it and move on? You just face it. And if you have that honest conversation with yourself and you recognize a pit in your stomach, that is a good area to think about setting a goal in relation to. Because if you have that pit in your stomach, there's already purpose there. The reason you have, and I mean, I use the term pit in your stomach because the first time I had one of these honest conversations with myself, that's what happened to me. Is I was like, oh my goodness, this is not where I want to be in life. I knew what I wanted. That pit in my stomach told me what I really wanted and what my purpose behind that thing, that element in life really was. And then I can attach an action plan, to that fear. Sherry Lynn says, face the fear. I can attach an action plan to that fear, make it a goal, and overcome it. Overcome that. That it could be a weakness. It could be phones are an addiction. I feel like it's a constant battle. It could be any of those things. It could be how you're spending your time. Like I said, your time and your money. That tells us what we are really focusing on in life, and that honest conversation is just, it's so empowering. It's scary, but it's empowering. You can do it. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any questions. Karen says, mine is to sit down with my planner and really look at what I want. I love it. Share your actions. That is a great idea, Karen. And really look at what I want for 2019. This would be the time to streamline and focus my time. That's awesome. That is a step in the right direction. Okay. Hannah said, can you say again what you meant about possibility versus probability? A lot of times when we set goals, traditional goals, SMART goals, whatever, we focus more on the possibility. We think, we look for the excuses, even if we don't think we are. We look for the reasons why we're not going to be able to achieve it. We do need to face the obstacles in our goals, and the Heart Goals goal setting process goes more in depth on that. That's an important part. There's some scientific research that explains why you need to focus on any obstacles that you would run into in trying to achieve your goal. But overall, for purposes of mindset, we need to be focusing on our ability to achieve those goals, that the goals actually are possible, that we're not saying, oh, that's impossible, I can never do that. We need to start believing, and in our own minds, rewiring our brains with some of that positive self-talk. It's really about a mindset. Focus on the possibility of achieving the goal versus the probability. So if you start, I'm just giving a lot of examples. You can stop me, Hannah, if I'm making sense now. But okay, that makes sense. Perfect. Love it. Love all of it. Thank you for allowing me to explain that. Okay, so the next workshop is going to be on Wednesday at 10 a.m. The next launch of the Heart Goals workbook is also Wednesday, and go on sale again for the third time this year, the last time this year. And I will do another series of workshops. Actually, in January when I do this, they're going to be pre-recorded videos. They won't be live workshops anymore. And that's a goal. And so if you want to join me live, I would love it if you have time on Wednesday. If not, we will be sending out replays to these videos, these workshops. And also on Friday, there'll be another workshop. So I would encourage you, just before I leave, if you ever feel like you've been resistant to setting goals, please consider joining me on Wednesday and or Friday, because I really want to completely abolish any discouraging thoughts that you have about setting goals. I also want to challenge you that you have a responsibility in your life to set goals, because you have potential, and in order to reach that potential and being the best version of yourself you can possibly be, goal setting is essential. And today we covered 10 reasons why SMART goals don't work, 7 reasons why our goals fail, and I gave you 9 questions to ask yourself as you in the next couple of days, or as you go into 2019, to think about goal setting. And if you found this webinar useful, this workshop useful, I would love it. You're going to get an email with a replay and a transcript. So I hope I can get that out later on today. But I would love it if you would share it with any friends that you think would benefit from this. Just hit forward on that. Anybody can watch it. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the right mindset. I'm going to talk about how to declutter your mind, and I'm going to talk about goal setting essentials. Okay, one more question. Will you share a link for the workbook Wednesday 3 months? Yes, I will be sharing the link. And in Friday, I will be sharing my goals as well, which is going to be pretty vulnerable. So in conclusion, wrapping up today, I want you to believe this about yourselves. You have dreams and you have time. You have time to set your goals. You have time to achieve your goals. You have everything that you need to do this. You have time to spend with your family. You have the ability to figure out how to make anything happen that you want to happen in 2019 or in your life. And I want you to start believing that, because that is the truth. Lies fuel fear, but truth fuels faith. And when we believe in ourselves, we're infusing our lives and our hearts and our minds with faith. We are believing in ourselves. And I want you to believe the truth about yourselves, that you are capable and that you can achieve anything you set your mind to. And I want you to feel your minds. And I'm going to talk more about that on Wednesday. So thank you guys so much for joining me. The workbook price is $39, and it's a digital workbook, and it comes with instructional tutorial videos, and also in January, pre-recorded videos. So the videos and then the workbook price in January is going up. It'll be $49. Lies fuel fear, but truth fuels faith, is the saying. Lies fuel fear, but truth fuels faith. So when we believe the truth about ourselves, it empowers us to believe that we can achieve things, and we need to start believing the truth about ourselves. Okay, that's all, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have absolutely enjoyed this time. Thank you for the questions. Y'all have a great day, and I'll get this recording in your inbox as soon as I possibly can. Share it with your friends. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.